coming down to the last couple of panels of the day. We're going to talk about 20% of the US GDP, so it's not that important, but we're going to be talking about healthcare, and it's been an exciting time to be in healthcare. 54 IPOs last year, $49 billion returned to investors from exits in the healthcare, in the pharmaceutical area. If you were to have bought the entire VC investment in biotech 7 years ago, you would have spent $4 billion and exited at $49 billion. So an incredible time in healthcare, really being driven by a lot of very exciting innovations. So technical innovations for drug development, improvements and efficiencies in the FDA review process, 60 drugs approved last year, half of them in under 5 years. So very efficient on the drug approval time. But there's been another side of healthcare that's been evolving and changing and moving, and it's a whole new way of looking at health and delivering health to consumers. And we've got a really exciting panel to talk about all that with you this afternoon. I want you to, as you're looking up your questions that you wrote down last night to ask this panel, think about ways in which you're encountering healthcare and it's not working for you. And maybe there'll be some answers from this panel about how that's going to change in the future, and specifically how we're going to interact with our pharmaceutical drugs, with our doctors, with our providers. And some of the lines around beauty and care and pharmaceutical drugs and personal care, you're going to see those lines starting to get more and more blurred or more coalesce. And so I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves, starting with you, Sid.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sid. I'm the co-founder and president at Truepill, and we are a pharmacy fulfillment service. So think of us as a set of APIs backed by our own pharmacy fulfillment services. So these are pharmacies spread across the country and even internationally at this point. The best way to wrap your head around what our business is if you think about analogous businesses like a Stripe in the payments industry or a Twilio in the telecom industry. They essentially took a very complex under-the-hood stack, abstracted it into a way that was very simple for customers and partners to use, and that's what we're doing in the pharmacy industry. And so in many ways, when you look at the way pharmacy is operated, you know the traditional retail chains, you may know many of the insurance players. They've existed the same way for decades and decades, and when we look ahead, we sort of can probably agree that the next major pharmacy player will not look like a CVS or a Rite Aid or will not look like an Express Scripts. So we believe very strongly it will be an infrastructure company. It will be one that's driven by, obviously, technology, and that's the business that we are setting out to build.
Yeah, cool. So my name is Jonas. I'm Swiss, but I'm living in Berlin. I flew in on Sunday. I'm actually representing Merantix Healthcare. I'm the CEO of Merantix Healthcare, which is a spin-off company out of the Merantix Venture Studio, based out of Berlin. And what we're doing at Merantix Healthcare, we're tackling the diagnostics industry, more specifically the medical diagnostics and medical imaging diagnostics industry. So we're actually making sure that radiologists, who are a very scarce resource, right, focus on what really matters for their patients. Today, especially when it comes to screening, early screening of breast cancer, for example, which is our first kind of use case we tackle, 97% of the cases are normal, so patients luckily don't have any finding. But the thing is, radiologists still spend a lot of time looking at those totally normal, totally unsuspicious images. And we changed that by basically applying machine learning in a way that normals are being ruled out. So we tell radiologists that a case is certainly normal and they can focus on the cases that are remaining. We currently have built our first product and are able to automate 50% of the reading. So radiologists have a tremendous workload reduction, and thereby we can make sure that the best radiologists in the world focus on the most complex studies wherever they're needed. So we're building a platform, and we're rolling out our platform globally and make sure that we tackle not only breast cancer early detection, but other cases like lung cancer screening and other early detection schemes.
Great. Hilary.
Hi, I'm Hilary Coles. I'm a co-founder of Hims and Hers. What we built at Hims and Hers is really a modern approach to care, which means that we put the patients first and minimize all the terrible barriers that have come with traditional healthcare, like the high expenses, the physical distance for many people, the complexity, the jargon, and really think through what's best for for the consumer. So since we launched in the end of 2017, we've helped hundreds of thousands of men and women address very, very common conditions like erectile dysfunction, hair loss, and other skincare issues like anti-aging and acne. And we're just thrilled because we believe that taking care of yourself shouldn't be so expensive, such a hassle, and so complicated.
Great. So when I talk to my fellow tech investors here in San Francisco, and I tell them I do healthcare investing, they're always concerned about all the regulation that's sitting in healthcare and the challenges and the deep science and all the other issues that come up with it, and wonder why anybody would want to start a company in the healthcare space, because it's so complex and different in different countries. And it's probably the most regulated industry you could possibly think of. So I've asked the group up here if they could share a little bit about why they decided to move into the healthcare space instead of starting a scooter company. And maybe we'll start with you, Hilary. Tell us why healthcare has been exciting for you to be in.
Sure. We got into this space because we believe that healthcare is fundamentally broken. It takes an average of 24 days for somebody in this country to see a PCP. It's going to cost them $117. They'll have to drive an average of 38 minutes to get there. And once they're there, they'll spend about 11 minutes with the doctor and 60 minutes waiting. None of that is in favor of the consumer, and none of that works the same way that the other parts of our life work, like a ride share or getting our groceries or our food delivered. And it's interesting you say people struggle with the regulated piece, because for us, telemedicine, which is the platform on which our business is based, is black and white, and we are in full compliance of the rules that are all mediated by each state, and have been able to use that to build a really, really strong business and inform all of our choices. So we built a platform that's entirely compliant of that, and it hasn't hindered our innovation.
Great. Jonas.
Yeah, so when it comes to me, I think I grew up and didn't know much else in healthcare because both my parents were doctors. Then I got presented the great opportunity at Merantix in Berlin to basically dig deeper into the healthcare space, and I got excited by the extreme inefficiency that's in the market, and similarly to what Hilary said, that the market is broken, and that shouldn't be the case. When I was looking at like how radiology is being done specifically, we learned that doctors are more and more scarce, right? They're like outpatient clinics, radiology departments that need to shut down because they don't find young radiologists that are excited about a job. And that's very sad, because patients should deserve the diagnosis and then the treatment they need. And now, to be honest, one of the biggest motivations for me to be in that space and like stand up every day again is really because I wanna show that you can build a great disruptive business in that space despite all the regulations, and certainly just to build a business that's gonna win.
Great. Sid, you started off at Johnson & Johnson. I remember you told me, hey, that was my first job out of school. Then you went to LinkedIn and you were sort of worked in the tech industry, and now when you're building a company, you've come back into healthcare.
Yeah.
So what was the motivation for that?
So I think the truth is my co-founder is a pharmacist, and he didn't tell me all the regulations when I joined. But I think the reality is, as you kind of enter this space, you understand that there is going to be regulatory hurdles. And at this point, probably shouldn't admit this, but I spent a lot of time reviewing legal stuff in the early days and completely unqualified to do so. And you start understanding the Board of Pharmacy laws and start to understand how every state views different areas. You start to increasingly look into the medical board laws as well, both of which we are held accountable by. And it's something that you just have to embrace. Unfortunately, it looks bad on our legal bills every month, but the reality is it is normal part of any kind of healthcare startup. I think I was probably very naive in the beginning to think that legal is one of these areas that you figure out how you're in compliance and you move forward. That's not necessarily the case. Compliance and regulatory hurdles become a constant part of your business, and it just has to become a core competency. And so when you think about, yes, we want to build a scalable software company, you don't enter the mix thinking, well, legal and regulatory is going to be a core competency, but when you're really talking about patient safety and ensuring that stays core to the business, it does effectively become a core competency and something that you take seriously for the lifetime of the business. And as much as you want to go rapidly from a technology and scale standpoint, there are certain things that you can move quickly on, and there are certain things you just cannot today.
So you just roll regulatory and compliance and all these issues. It just becomes part of the fabric of the company, like sales, like marketing,
Absolutely.
like
And
anything
it has
else.
to
No different.
kind of echo across every function in your organization when you start thinking about areas that you want to invest into and bet on. And what's interesting when you look at pharmacy board laws and medical board laws, I can point you to examples where the two will say completely different things, completely contradictory. And so how do you interpret those? Or,
Right.
you know, folks will ask us, you're a pharmacy, why do you even care about what the medical boards say, or why do they care about what you say? And I think the reality is, yes, that might be true for a traditional brick and mortar pharmacy, but when you think about our partners like Hims and Hers and the volume.
No
they send us-
collusion. There's no collusion.
There's no collusion, but our great partners, like when they send us volume, a medical board director can come down and ask us something very simple, and it's happened in various forms of, can you explain to us how one physician is sending you so many prescriptions? And while that's not typical from a normal pharmacy standpoint, you're telling us that you haven't looked into the medical protocol that they use to prescribe. And so it becomes very obvious that we have to be more involved in understanding the protocol that's used, and that's what we spend a lot of time doing, where we can't operate like a normal pharmacy. We have to think beyond what this industry is going to evolve into and how we can adapt and stay compliant for a long time.
So do you provide a regulatory function for Hims, or do you have that built into the structure of what you're doing at Hims, Hilary?
I would say our lawyers are on the phone all the time.
Oh,
We
okay.
spend a lot of time together.
So there is collusion. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I'd say each party is an expert in their own area, and I think what we have to do is bring both approaches together at a table and figure out how to do this at scale. And every state, as Hilary will tell you, is different and will create different. Yeah, it's a different ballgame in every state that we operate.
So there's been a lot of talk at this meeting about disrupting this and disrupting that. We decided not to disrupt the FDA, so you'll all be safe when you go to buy groceries tomorrow. But we do think about seismic shifts in the healthcare area where things can really change dramatically and really impact lives. And I asked the panelists to think about a moment in their company or a piece of technology or something that really, an insight that they had that made the difference to make the company come together and succeed. And maybe, Jonas, we'll start with you and
Yeah, please.
the aha moment about, was it a piece of technology? Did a puzzle get solved? What was it?
I think that's a very good question because, as you said, the hurdles are really there, and they're huge. So you need to find hacks to get into the market, to access the market, and then find ways to scale once you have the access. And in our case, we were trying to sell technology to radiologists, so to the user who doesn't really want to be replaced by the technology we built, right? So it's a very it's very much a misalignment between us and the user, and that's always a very hard problem and the spot you don't want to be in, right? Because user adoption will be super hard, and when user adoption is hard, sales is super hard. So what we do instead is we actually use the technology we build for ourselves, use it ourselves to provide the service to the customer, which is much better and much more aligned because you directly sell to the CFO of the hospital, not to the radiologist, which means that you have a customer that really wants that you sell him, whereas the radiologist doesn't want to be sold in the first place. And I think that was really like something we do completely differently than anyone else, and something we learned the hard way, but now do and try to do at scale, and it works pretty well so far. So basically hide the technology that is great, but hide it between a service and then sell a service.
Great. Hilary, I remember the first time I saw Hims, and the reason I was using someone's bathroom at a party, and I happened to notice this bottle sitting on the shelf that said Hims on it. And I'm like, what?
Sounds like they have good
I've never
taste.
seen that brand anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so went home and Googled it, and then realized, oh, wow, look at this. And a lot of the things that you've said about Hims came true, just how easy it was to use and everything else. But what was the moment that you and your co-founder had? Was there a moment, or was there kind of an ongoing realization of that this was going to work and it was going to?
Yeah, I think
It was
that's a
gonna be
really perfect
impactful.
anecdote for one of our most key insights, which was really, really human, which is that 9 out of 10 men who are coming to our platform were coming to us to treat a condition for the very first time. And that's because society has so stigmatized this idea of taking
I don't
care
have
of
a
yourself.
condition. I don't have a
Yes,
condition.
of course,
I
of course.
don't have any
Everyone can have thicker hair. There's no problem there. there's this idea that it's weird to take care of yourself, and yet there are these conditions that are extremely, extremely common. 2/3 of men by the age of 35 will start to have their hair thin or shed or bald, and 1 in 4 men by the time that they'll turn 40 will have symptoms of erectile dysfunction. These aren't these older man disease conditions, and they're not specialized. And most people here are numbers people. These aren't numbers games that people are going to be able to game or win against. They're common, and the annoying thing is they're really, really treatable. And until now, it's been out of reach because important drugs have been on patent, because society has not framed it in a way that has invited men to the table to make them feel comfortable enough to want to take care of themselves. And the whole process of seeing a doctor, as I mentioned earlier, is terrible and expensive, and you have to cancel your whole day, and nobody wants that. And so we thought if we could build an experience where end to end, it was like buying anything else, shampoo or food or whatever it is in your life, then you would be more conditioned and more empowered by sake of doing that. And it wouldn't be so weird to leave out a Hims product, potentially for balding, potentially for sex, in your bathroom at a party. And it sounds kind of normal now, but 3 years ago, that was totally crazy that you would all be so kind as to listen to a woman from a hair and dick pill company talk to you at the end of the day on a Thursday. But that's been a huge, huge shift in how people think of themselves. And if you've grown up and you've thought that you've never had options before, and at our core, Hims and Hers are here to provide options, whether that's for performance anxiety and you thought you'd never be able to get up and speak and defend your thesis, which we hear from people all the time, or you're always going to have an unsatisfying sex life, or just like your options in the mirror, what have you. How impactful it is to be able to say, I have options, and how that makes you feel about yourself and your outcome on the world, we think is just really, really powerful and hugely motivating.
That's great. Sid, I think about taking on the pharmacy benefit manager and the whole that pharmacy industry, and how sort of crusted and old it seems, and to sort of think about seismically shifting that business to where you've shifted it.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I used to think that coming out of LinkedIn that network effects are the best business model I've ever seen in my life, and then I found out what a PBM was. It's just, it's crazy sometimes when you think about the amount of influence and control they have in this space, and how difficult they make it for any kind of innovation or any kind of shift in the space and how we need to operate. We spend countless hours every week just figuring out what our strategy is to combat against the PBMs, to really stay alive, because it is existential to our business when you think about...
Tell people what a PBM is for
a
minute.
We'll back up.
Maybe not everybody knows.
So when you pull out an insurance card today and go see a doctor, you'll see a logo on your card. It'll say Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and that's your health sponsor, or your health plan. That's the entity that's covering things like your MRI or your doctor visit, for example. On that card, you'll also see a six-digit number. It's called a BIN number, and that corresponds to a PBM. That's a pharmacy benefit manager. The 3 biggest ones in the country are companies like Express Scripts, Caremark, which is part of CVS, and Optum. These are all $100 billion companies that really, if you look at every stakeholder in the healthcare ecosystem, from drug manufacturer to retail pharmacy to wholesaler to health plan to PBM, they're by far the most powerful and honestly devastating to anyone that tries to confront them. And we've seen that and learned that the hard way. But I think it sort of takes a very holistic, long-term approach of, yes, you're going to face pain. Yes, the PBMs are not going to like what you're doing when you start thinking about expanding nationally and operating across all 50 states. And we just have to figure out strategies to stay alive in the coming years, as well as build long-term relationships and really explain to them that what Hers is doing on the female contraception side is actually good for the healthcare ecosystem. It's actually lowering the cost of healthcare overall. And we're still in the nascent stages of getting through on explaining why this is disruptive and why it's good for them and why it lowers their overall costs. Because ultimately they see any kind of pharmacy that's going to expand to 50 states as competitive with their own businesses. So a pharmacy benefit manager, original intent is to manage the pharmacy benefits for your employer. So they determine which medications you get and don't to control the cost for the employer that you work for. But the reality is, the hidden secret is they also own and operate their own pharmacies. And imagine a world where you could sit back and literally pick off pharmacy is a $400 billion category. And if I told you that 10% of the medications account for 90+% of the gross profit and revenue, and you were in a vantage point where you could literally cherry pick just that 10% and not deal with anything else, that is a PBM. And that's what they figured out how to do. And when you start unwinding the pieces of how they do that, yeah, it is.
So that brings us to this other question about incumbents. And I think when you move into an industry where you're going to change the game and change the way it's played, and you're going to take customers, attract attention, there's going to be incumbents, and there's going to be the taxi driver to your Uber. So who's the taxi driver to your Uber, Hilary? And how do you think, well, tell me how you think about incumbents, because maybe they're also partners too.
You know, when we built the business, we saw it as a lot of opportunity that wasn't being taken. I remember I had to go and actually beg a manufacturer out in Inglewood, California, to put us on the line for this OTC product that has been around for decades. And he was like, "You will never move this product. I don't know what you're promising and what you're doing." And I was like, "Please just put us on the line, I promise." And we've outgrown him several times over since we launched. And similarly, if you look at the sales for finasteride, generic Propecia finasteride, you can see when we launched in November 2017, and then it hockey pucks up like that, and we're responsible for 100% of that growth of both the category and that new growth. So I think people are noticing us. We're trying to stay disciplined and focused on the customer, though.
Well, I can't tell you the number of times we've been blocked from buying your finasteride because the wholesaler just cut us off because they don't believe that we need to buy that type of volume, and it's crazy that.
Yeah, you must get some interesting calls.
Yeah.
Cool. So Jeff Hinton is the founder of Neural Networks and at the University of Toronto. And one of the articles he said is, we're never going to need a radiologist again because of the use of neural networks for looking at radiology. Are they the incumbents that you've got to deal with, the fact that now you're going to the CFO with the sale? The radiologist is going to get told what's happening in the hospital because of your sale. Is that the incumbent group that you're up against?
I think yeah, that's an interesting perspective to think about it. Essentially, we're certainly not there yet that radiologists will be completely, taken out of the loop. You'll need them for legal reasons, but also for actual medical reasons. So partially, I can answer your question with yes, because what we're doing is we're basically selecting the radiologists that want to work with us, right? Because remember, we offer a service instead of the software. So what we do is we go out there and ask radiologists, hey, do you want to work for us? You can focus only on the cases that are suspicious, only the cases that are interesting in the first place. And I think those who are willing to do that will not be replaced.
Because that's
They're
what
more
they
like
want to see,
Uber
right?
drivers, right?
They want to be able to see they don't want to be sitting there looking at cases
normals,
where there's
exactly.
normals.
It's really like assembly line style work, and they just don't want to do that. And those who will stand up and wake up and work with us will not be replaced. But the radiologists in the departments will be because we will be offering the service they currently do, right? So I think that's one of the perspectives, and the other one to incumbents certainly are like the software incumbents, like Siemens, GE Healthcare, and all those guys.
We don't have to worry about GE Healthcare anymore. But
yeah, well, okay. Okay. So. Then like Siemens, yeah, it's a German company, so we should be worried. No, but like, so basically, like they're also like interesting group of incumbents we need to take care of and closely monitor. And I think I want to build like a great company and like win. And I think if we're just gonna be the algorithm provider to those like incumbent systems, we will lose for sure because we will be commoditized. So we need the access ourselves. We need to control the workflows ourselves. So what we do is essentially we completely build the IT systems that are required to do the diagnosis, to offer the service. We build it just ourselves, and we build it better. We build it with increased, user experience. We heavily deploy algorithms on top of it, so we automate our own work. And once we want to evolve from a service provider to the actual software company, we will have the best software in the world and hopefully like get all of those like incumbent players out of the market.
Now, Sid, you mentioned the PBMs. Obviously, they're the monster incumbent on the block. Is there a way to include them, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I would say the thing we should stress and highlight is three and a half years ago, the area of telemedicine and the scale at which it's done didn't exist the way it does today. And so that in itself was a massive shift in healthcare where typically, as Hilary mentioned, you have to go see your primary care provider. Now you can go online and consult with a physician online. That in itself was enough innovation to see this massive shift. And so when we think about the incumbents, we look at it a little bit differently. Think about what other areas in the healthcare stack can move into telemedicine, what other medications, what other therapy areas can move over into telemedicine. And there's really no shortage. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of those areas that we can go after. When you start thinking about things like sending a lab test to a patient's home where they can now mail that back, what clinical or therapy areas does that open you up to? When you think about combining, maybe there are certain health areas where you probably do need to see your physician in person. What does it look like when you see a person at a clinic for the first time and then move to telemedicine for subsequent visits? What other therapy areas does that get into you? And so I think we are just very early days for what telemedicine looks like, and I think the incumbents will have to see where they sort of enter the market to fight back.
So I'm hoping there's absolutely no questions out there, because we've got a lot more we want to talk about, but I'll give you one shot. Is there any questions out there for this group? It's pretty interesting. 20% of our GDP. Yep.
Just a question for Sid. Where does Amazon sit in this ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get it all the time, and we don't have the perfect answer, right? The truth is, I think we all in this room probably speculate on how Amazon will enter the market and what their offering will look like. My guess is probably as good as yours. And I think the way we position ourselves is, I think when Amazon enters the space with the offering that they do, whether it's a PBM or enter the cash pay space, when you look at the other players, the other PBMs, the health plans, when we think about how do they stay competitive against an Amazon, which is going to be very fierce competition, we think being very tech-enabled and tech-focused puts us in a good spot. And so now we think about who are the partners that we want to align with and be strategically focused with for the long term. But I would say we don't exactly know what Amazon will enter into the market with, and we're as eager as I'm sure analysts are as well as what they will do in the healthcare and pharmacy space specifically.
Other questions for this panel? Otherwise, we'll return to our discussion. So so Sid just closed the Series A not too long ago. You're trying to get to your Series A, and you guys just closed a Series C?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. So let's take a few minutes each, or a minute or so each of you, to just talk about the future. What's next? How big can this get when you can't go to sleep at night because you're so excited about what's coming down the road and the new features and the new things? Let's start with you, Hilary. Where's him and hers going?
Hims and hers. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're a entirely cash business, no insurance right now. And we're seeing an enormous demand, and it's because people want purchasing power and control back in their health, and they want to be in the driver's seat. So I think as we think through how we're going to continue to best serve patients and people and consumers and whatever, wrap all that up together, is where else can we be part of possibly the diagnostic side of this whole consumer journey? Where can we be a part and offer an adjacent service to perhaps a protocol that you're already taking with us? So there's a lot to fix and there's a lot to address, and we're excited to keep on the North Star of patient-forward health.
Great. Yeah. Great. Jonas, beyond breast cancer or a bigger piece of the pie for...
Yeah. First of all, I think we need to discuss the context real quick. So the way radiology is being done today is that you have the hardware, the scanners, and the scans are basically conducted. And then you have the radiologists on site at the same place where the hardware is being located to read those scans. And the thing is, both ends are very inefficient today. And the way we see the future is that the hardware and the radiologists don't need to be at the same place. And it actually boils down to telemedicine again.
Right.
We believe that we'll be the platform to read every single scan that is being conducted by the hardware remotely, and 90% of the cases will be read by machines, so very efficiently, instantly, so patients don't need to wait for their diagnosis, and the rest will be forwarded to experts who are extremely subspecialized, more subspecialized than they can ever be without us, and then increase patient outcomes. And yes, sure, breast cancer is just the beginning. It's just our proof of principle, and we want to.
I want to give
expand
Sid a chance here, just a few closing seconds here. How
Sure.
big? How far?
So when you look at the overall pharmacy pie, I mentioned it's a $400 billion segment. The real question here is what part of that will shift over into telemedicine, and we can argue it's $50 billion or $100 billion. But I think the key here is it's very clear, we're very certain that when it does shift over, it's the pharmacy of the future to power that segment does not look like a Rite Aid and CVS. And you can't have a magical experience like you do on the Hims and Hers platform and then send the patient into a Rite Aid and Walgreens. That just completely breaks the model. And so as more of that spend shifts over into telemedicine, we think that this will require a new type of pharmacy experience, and we want to build that infrastructure layer to power that category.
So stay tuned. This is going to be an exciting growth area in the healthcare space, and this has been a great panel. Thanks for sharing all of this with us here at this meeting. Thanks a lot, guys.